I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today my guest is Bennett, who is a lawyer and the author of 2 books, one of which we're going to talk about extensively today. It's called Law and the Heart. And I know that may sound like a contradiction, but it's really not and it shouldn't be. So we're going to get into that. Welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Good to be here, Phil.
And today's prophetic topic is there is no distinction between the heart and God. And this topic is extracted from the opening quote of Law and the Heart and comes from a saying by Indian saint Ramana Maharishi. The saying reads as follows: "The liberated say that just as God is the stay of the universe, so also the heart is of the individual. The part must be of the nature of the whole. The whole, God, is infinity. Therefore, there is no distinction between the heart and God." And that's a beautiful saying, and I don't even know where to begin. Why don't we start with, you wrote this book, so something in your experiences, Merritt, showed you that this needed to be written. And can we discuss that? How'd you get here? How'd you get to write this book, besides like going to school and becoming an attorney?
Well, it's probably a combination of things that occurred over time. Just looking back at as when I wrote this book, or at least finished it, was in 1996? Did we decide?
Yeah.
At that point in my life, I had been practicing law for just over 20 years, about 20 years. And I had done quite a few aspects of law, criminal defense work. I've been a corporate lawyer, business lawyer, a civil trial lawyer, tried lawsuits, won lawsuits, lost lawsuits, and just done really quite a variety of things in the profession. And I was at a point where I'd done enough and seen enough that I began to question whether or not that this was really the path for me, and whether or not I should stay on it or not. And
law in general, or one specific type of law?
Well, I guess law in general. I mean, there were phases that I moved in and out of a particular type of law. Like I was a criminal lawyer initially for about 3 years, and did criminal defense work, murder cases, rape cases, all sorts of criminal defense cases. And that, although that's where I got a valuable training as a trial lawyer, it really didn't match my disposition, I guess, or that isn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. And so I moved into something completely different at that point in time. I became a business lawyer and an estate planner. And so I learned all about corporations and partnership and estate planning and business law, which is a real contrast to criminal defense law. And then ultimately moved out of being strictly a business lawyer into a business litigator, combining the litigation skills from criminal law with the business skills from a business office practice and went back into the courtroom as a civil trial lawyer. And from there, I think when I moved to Santa Fe, it was 1986. In 1987, I began to get into personal injury law, plaintiff's personal injury law, which was moving out of the strictly civil trial practice into personal injury practice. And then that was in the late 80s. And then in the early 90s, it was around 94, I got a call from a friend of mine who was a lawyer in Wyoming who said, I have a fellow in my office said he was sexually molested by a priest in New Mexico. And I said, well, that's very interesting. Why don't you send him down and we'll see if we can help. And so he did. He was originally from New Mexico, a small town in New Mexico. And as it turns out, he and two of his brothers were sexually molested by a priest. And so as a result of that beginning, I ultimately was involved in approximately 150 cases against the Archdiocese of Santa Fe for clergy sexual abuse. So that really began to, I think, stimulate a huge shift in my reason for being a lawyer, in my own consciousness and deepening of an understanding of human behavior and suffering and the real work that was calling out to be done on the planet. And I think that that really rocked my world, personally and professionally. And I began to actually look at the reasons why I was doing what I was doing. It was no longer a job anymore. It was, I could say, a calling, but it was I was being called to come out of myself to do more than just 9 to 5. So that whole period of time in the mid-90s began to slowly open me up, and out of that process came this book.
How much of the book was infused by your own personal spiritual practice? How much of your practice was infused by the experiences you had? I mean, it seems like they ought to be interrelated.
Sure. They're always interrelated, whether you admit it or not, or know it or not. But one is the other, and the other is one. So it was just part. The book was just part of a manifestation of a process that I was going through, I thought, at a deep level, but it hasn't stopped. So
that's the beauty of it.
We're still in it.
How much of that do you think, I mean, did having to deal with the church and the sexual abuse change your perspective on religion and spirituality?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly when you're involved in that type of work, you're focused on the balance that is always presenting itself to us day to day. Is in this particular case the enmeshment between crimes being committed and a higher calling to God or Spirit. We're all kind of compressed into one lumpy ball, and so you had to really evaluate your own place in all of it, and it was a very, very intense experience, because one of the things that I could see in these victims was the intense inner spiritual struggle that they were left to hold the bag of, which was, on the one hand, they had a deep faith, and on the other hand, there was a worldly or material side that was actually causing them harm, but they didn't want to admit it because they felt to admit it was also a sin. And so there was a tremendous amount of guilt along with deep faith. So it was very, very, made me look at my own life, my own spirituality, if you will, what's it all about, and what's important and what's not, and who do you believe and who don't, and where do you go for answers, and who do you rely on, and all of it was kind of turning me back on my inner,
forcing you to find and hold your center.
Well, and I can't say that I did it very well during that time period, because I definitely went through extremes, but certainly it began turning inward of my life and my profession and everything. Of course, your profession is just part of your life, and so that, of course, got affected by everything else I was going through. So.
And I don't think we could ever have those experiences and start off doing them well, other than the handful of people on the planet who are self-realized. And I think we have to go through those swings to find the center.
And I'm still going through it, you know. I mean, this journey is never over. So.
I mean, I remember when I first started working as a counselor, and running into similar kind of situations. It wasn't necessarily priests, but it could have been family members. It could have been people in authority. And what was that movie? I forget the movie where the guy runs through the corridors holding the guy's head on a spike. One of those epic movies of a long time ago. And that's how I felt. I mean, it wasn't about anything other than how dare they, and let's get vengeance. So I mean, I don't know that we are capable of just finding that center spot automatically without some radical swings to know where we don't want to go.
Yeah, I agree. You begin to see how, the fluctuations and the swings of good versus bad, and evil versus spiritual, and so forth, and you can remain in that swing mode, if you will, and that's what life is about. That's what suffering is about. Life is suffering, and I think we're all going through it day to day, because we stay in our minds so much that we're always splitting things up into us versus them, or good versus bad, and when you do that, you suffer.
I want to take a quote out of your book here. You have it broken down into a few sections, which basically the problem, taking responsibility, the solution, then the future, and how to choose a lawyer. I don't know if we're going to get to all the sections, but the problem, how the mind relates. People feel lawyers lack integrity. Society discounts feelings and intuitive nature of humans, logic and rationale over sensitivity and feelings. How did we get there?
How do we get there?
Yeah.
Well, I think we got there because we're human, and that's the nature of our minds, is to separate things into discernible parts, and then we label those parts and try to make sense of them. And with respect to the legal system, we're trying to make sense of how humans relate to each other and create some order out of chaos, and we do that by intellectually separating this relationship from that relationship, and this rule from that rule, and we create this system to basically keep us from obliterating each other, but when you focus on that too much, it becomes everything is out there, and it becomes cold, less compassionate. We rely on rules instead of feelings, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be. It can be harmful. And so as long as we keep this intense mental activity of separation into some sort of perspective and remember that really it's to help beings and to bring less suffering in the world, then there might be some hope even for the legal profession. So
I mean,
that's the process.
If I understand what part of what you're saying is really, we have so, for lack of a better phrase, split hairs that the parts have become greater than the whole?
Well, they can be, and sometimes it's necessary to do that, but when you lose perspective of why you're doing that, I think it can become very hostile and damaging. And so I think our system can actually damage humans instead of help humans. And it was designed to help humans, and I think it can if we come from a more compassionate, open-hearted perspective and not don our armor of the adversary dragon slayer every time we...
So that would require us to get out of ego in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, it gets enmeshed with ego, because if I'm right and you're wrong, then I have an investment in the outcome that is personal. And as long as I'm personally invested, then I will be cruel, and I will do everything I can to win, and that, of course, will be at your expense. And so I can't. I'm lost. I have no way of getting to a view that is broader and more acceptable of a solution that will benefit everybody. And they call it an adversarial system, because that's what the system will naturally generate if you just focus on all of these little parts and distinctions and who's right and who's wrong. And sometimes you have to do that. But if you really lose sight of the whole of what you're doing, then you can actually not be helpful and be actually hurt people.
So the function of the legal system is to create a win-win situation for both parties?
That's a very utopian view of what the function of the legal system would be. The function of the legal system is, in theory, the theory of the legal system is that I present my best adversarial case, you present your best adversarial case, and so the outcome basically is going to be this higher combination of the two. We go to war, and then some sort of higher form rises out of the ashes. That's the theory of it, and the people that help you bring about that conclusion in a civil litigation context is a jury. But what I know is that it doesn't work that way. We're not all equally skilled or equally balanced or equally resourced or equally viewed. The world is full of this and that, and
inherent prejudices,
good and better, and bad and better, and so those outcomes are rare, really.
So we start to see people based upon the path they walk as opposed to the spirit they are.
Absolutely. That's the human nature. Is the minute we observe another human, we're automatically projecting upon them, that's what the book talks about, our own view of the world, and we're judging them in the light of our own projection of how we view the world, and we're already drawing conclusions and we haven't even met them. And so in the courtroom, it's the same thing. People walk into the courtroom, the jury is already making judgments about outcomes just based upon how humans look. The color of their skin, the way they dress, the way they walk.
So if I showed up with a ponytail and a bandana, I'd be guilty before they even opened their mouth.
Absolutely. Big trouble. Well, I mean,
yeah.
But you would have to overcome the judgment of a certain group who would not, or who would perceive your appearance or the way I talk or my appearance in a certain way. So it's not always, you don't always get what they call a fair trial, just by nature of who we are as humans. It's very difficult.
Well, I mean, it also goes against, and I mean, I'm not going to go pulling up every religion, but basic Christianity, judge not or you shall be judged. You know, so I mean, we have a system that is really going against one of the basic dictates.
Well, it's true in theory, but then again, remember, we're humans, and so if you try to come up with something else, and people have, to replace what we've got, it could even get worse. And so, also know the phrase, this is the best of two evils, or
yeah,
the lesser of all
lesser
evils.
Of two evils.
Yeah. So, it's not the greatest and best, and certainly there's room for improvement, but the reason we are where we are is because the alternative could be a lot worse. So, having said all of that, and what the book talks about is, given what we've got, the more we actually look at ourselves and how all of this works, how the reality of what we're involved with actually works in terms of the thing I was talking about, projection.
Uh-huh.
You know, I look at somebody, and once I realize that when I look at this person or situation, and I'm looking at through the color of my own life lens, and I begin to pull back that projection into, okay, how am I, from what perspective am I viewing this situation or person or human or whatever it is, then I can become more understanding, more forgiving, more compassionate, more in service, more supportive. Because if I stay out in my projection, then I am Mr. Adversary. And my feeling is, if I'm out here, I can't help anybody.
And I think one of the beauties of this book, in my opinion, I mean, and I'm not a large consumer of legal text or commentary either, but what you do with this book is really, to me, that Gandhi's saying, be the change you want to see in the world. So you're not sitting here writing a book that says we got to change this law and this process and this procedure. You're saying it starts with the client and the attorney and their relationship. How are they meeting one another? And
right.
That will set the tone, at least for one half of what's going on.
Yeah, that's where it starts. Because people, when they come, they perceive that they have a certain issue and that it's legal in nature. And if I allow them to stay in that position of perspective or judgment, I may not be serving them, because they may be coming in feeling that that's what their situation calls for, but it may not. But if I'm going to stay in the lawyer role, I will agree and that whatever they're perceiving is true, and then I will participate in this illusion that what they have is a legal problem, and they may not have a legal problem. It may have nothing to do with a legal problem, although that is how their challenge in life is manifesting. And so to the extent I'm able, I'm not a therapist, but sometimes I feel that way, to the extent I'm able is to help them take a step back and see what is really creating, or what are the factors creating this life situation that they're presented with. There may be another solution that's totally non-legal. And if we can find that solution, who wants to be involved with the legal system?
So from what I hear you saying, and maybe it's just my own filter of the words, have we as a society become too litigious? I mean, like, we're always looking for somebody to blame, and somebody should take responsibility for what I'm not taking responsibility for myself for.
Yeah, but I don't think that necessarily, I agree with that. I think we're becoming more us versus them. But I don't think that necessarily translates into we're becoming too litigious. I think that's just, we're going through a phase as a culture where, and the whole planet is, of us versus them. And that may or may not apply to the legal system. So, not necessarily.
Well, your book is approaching this whole process on its root level, the client-attorney relationship. So, I mean, the reason I'm saying that is that this us versus them is not the system dictating to the people participating as much as the people participating dictating to the system. That we've made it this way. I mean, it's something you and I were talking about at the beginning, that we're not in our heart, which is, I believe, our spirit. We're in our head, which I believe is our adversary, for lack of a better term, and not in a bad sense, but in a sense to challenge us to, like, do I like what I'm seeing when I listen to this voice, or do I want to hear my other voice? Mm-hmm. And it's become in my opinion, and I'm not as deeply immersed in it as you are, obviously, it's become almost like a game. I've got to win. And I've got to win not only for my client, I've got to win for me and my reputation, and I've got to win to feed my ego. If I could find that loophole that allows me to, so we keep, keep making laws to redefine laws to redefine laws, and I'm not sure if we're not losing in the translation. I don't know if there's a question.
I don't think it's I don't think it's a game. I think it's more of a syndrome.
Okay. What's the difference?
Well, a game is well, I guess some people do try to manipulate the system for their own end, and that's what becomes a game. But I think it's just an expectation that this system, or any system, is going to improve my lot in life. And what really improves my lot in life is how I view my life. And so that the taking responsibility part is, so my life is how I choose to live it and how I choose to perceive it. And one situation for one person may be suffering, and another, in the same situation to another person, may be contentment. So I think the only way I can help another person make a good, let's take the legal system for example. Decisions have to be made that involve legal relationships. And so the question is, what is the best decision for this person that's sitting in front of me with respect to the legal relationship decision that they have to make? So we can come at it from a variety of different perspectives. We can say, how do I win? How do I get the most money? How do I do what I need to do? But each of those decisions have consequences, costs, risk. And so if you then flip it the other way and say, okay, what do you want to be the outcome in terms of your well-being? And if you look at it from that perspective, you may want to stay as far away from the legal system as you can get, because you need to know what you're entering, and you need to know whether or not that's going to give you the real result you want, and that is well-being or upliftment or contentment or stepping away from anger or jealousy or rage or more suffering.
It's almost a catch-22. I mean, what you're talking about is trying to be spiritual in a non-spiritual practice, and then having to apply spiritual principles where people are being inundated with the concept it's all about me.
Well, and all you can do is
situation.
All I can do is enter each encounter from a broader perspective, and I don't always stay. I get caught up in it too. It's always it's a practice, and perfection is kind of a whole nother level. But all I can do is engage in my practice, and I think if I stay there, just stay there, then I can actually help another person engage in their practice, whatever that may be, so they get an outcome that is more satisfying in the long term for them. And it may involve forgiveness, it may involve letting go, it may involve taking care of themselves in a different way. I mean, I don't know. All I can do is take responsibility for myself, and when I do that, it's sometimes just doing that. I don't have to do anything. It encourages the person that has come to me for help to engage in self-responsibility for themselves. And actually, when that happens, then these legal situations or problems really actually dissolve quite rapidly, either through application of legal principles, or they just go away, because all of a sudden you realize their place in the structure, the hierarchy of who you want to be and how do you want to live, and what goals you really ultimately want to achieve.
So I get to meet myself and see what I'm attached to.
Why not?
Well, I mean, if we had a whole world doing that would be pretty radical, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it'd be great. It'd be fantastic. But see, we can't go out there and make everybody do it. All we can do is what we can do, and then it's going to happen or not in the outer world. But the more we all are recalled or reminded to look inward, it's got to be better for everybody.
And that comes to, I mean, I don't know if we said this off air or on air in conversation, but we talked about what is a pretty basic Buddhist concept, that being human is to suffer. That the cause of suffering is being human.
Well,
and there are some aspects of Buddhism that add to that. It's not only being human, but there's also karma, that the two of them come together to create the suffering. So in a theoretically spiritual world, looking for fairness is really not acknowledging karma. That with looking for something to protect us from ourselves when we've actually created the circumstances that we are experiencing.
That's true. That's exactly right. We create our own suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of, and I think a lot of people might object to this, but I use this with my clients a lot, is that we're not victims, we're volunteers.
Well, sometimes you are totally entitled to get that legal case from hell because you signed up for it,
Yeah.
And so, but once you begin to take responsibility, it says, I participated in the creation of this mess. Once you have that realization, then you can begin to it'll unravel. And then there's no mess, because the mess is only in your mind.
I think the mess is my mind. My mind is the mess.
Well, yeah, I guess which came first, the mess or the mind?
That's why it's law in the heart, not law in the mind.
That's right. That's right.
I want to get into some of the stuff that you had some interesting, you had this book, if those of you who are interested in reading it, it's a short but really beautiful read. And there's small chapters, so for me that was easy to digest. I was like, like some people write books and there's like 70-page chapters, and I'm like, here you read 3 or 4 pages, you got a chapter, you can put it down, pick it up, and another, And each of them have some of these really fantastic quotes from a variety of different people to carry this point. But
yeah, that was fun, actually, find those quotes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I do that for the show at times,
Yeah.
going researching for quotes. Not everybody writes a book that it's easy to pull something out of.
Right.
Sometimes I get a topic and I got to go searching through and don't want to go there. So what you did in the first section was you took what basically seemed like a very Jungian kind of approach, and you even quoted Jung at one point in one of those chapters. I think it was the shadow chapter, that people showing up at your door demonstrate some basic characteristics, and you broke them down into something like the shadow, the witch, the victim, and things like that.
Right.
Could you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. The minute we imagine that what is in front of us is not part of us, we're in trouble.
So I've got to, when you walk into my office, I've got to see you as me, and me as you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
But you have to be careful about what you're looking at. Are you looking at, you have to understand the process. The process is, when I look out, I am not looking without prejudice. I am looking with my own prejudices in mind. I'm looking through the sunglasses, if you will, of my own prejudice.
The filters of your own experience.
Exactly, or my own karma, or my own teaching, or what I've been taught, or whatever that is. So, as I look out, several things are happening. Number one, I'm projecting my own prejudices onto a person or a thing. And then that person or thing is reflecting back what I've just projected. Mm-hmm. And then I will perceive the reflection in the way I'm conditioned to perceive it.
So what you're describing is a very poor start to good communication. So what you're basically saying is we're both dealing with illusions.
Exactly.
So how do you get past the illusions for you, and how do you get the client to get past their illusions?
The only way you can move forward from there is to, number one, understand that process is happening. And number two is that when you really understand that process happening, which I'm not saying that I do, all the time, because it's when you do that, then the minute you understand that, there is no separation between us and them, me and other. And when that separation is removed in the ultimate sense, the ultimate sublime ether, then you have natural compassion for other, because other is self. And so the compassion just comes forth naturally, and because there is no distinction between self and other. And so if we want to live in that space of compassion, then we have to understand how it's working in the first place. So that's the reason I try to break it down into the projection, the reflection. There are different types of projection. Like shadow is like the shadow projection is the projection of that dark part of us. If we're seeing in somebody anger, That's because we know what the hell anger is, because we got it, and we can easily see it in another because we're projecting it out there and it's coming right back at us. And so the minute we bring that home, we can deal with our own anger instead of seeing it show up in another person. And the minute we start to do that, the anger in the other person that we perceived starts to dissolve. It's just like when you have an encounter with a human and you have an attitude when you enter that encounter, or you're angry, what do you evoke from them? Your own anger. It's coming right back at you, right?
I had a teacher, he was a channeled entity. I don't know how you feel about that stuff, but for me, there's a lot of fakes, but there's a couple of real channels out there, and this I believe was a real channel. He was a 4th or 5th century Buddhist monk by the name of Chet Lao. And he was basically he was a famous meditator in his day. And he would just live in a cave and meditate for 23 hours, and for an hour come out and collect berries, and that would be it. And when he passed over, you get into these life reviews, and basically, what did you do for anybody else? And it was like, well, nothing. So he'd agreed to come back and teach, and he came back teaching through a variety of people who were willing to be the channel, so to speak. And what I'm getting to is, I just wanted to give you the source of the information, is he taught 12 virtues, that we're here to master 12 virtues. He considered mastering 51%. The number one virtue is what you were talking about. I make short stories long. Is harmony. And what he said was, harmony affects everything it touches. If we're in harmony, our harmony will touch others and help get them to that place. Mm-hmm. And the same is true with disharmony, which is what you were saying. If we're in disharmony and the other person's not in harmony or has precarious harmony, we're going to impact them. But that harmony will always be more powerful than disharmony. And to me, that's what you're talking about is that energetic thing that passes from spirit to spirit. And if we're not, quote, centered, I could be affected by your anger. I could be affected by your rage. I could be affected by anything. So we need to understand that coming in to any relationship.
What I'm saying is even one step further than that.
Okay.
It's not my harmony versus your harmony. It's the harmony is the same.
If it's existing.
And that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
The place that I'm talking about, I guess it's a semi-harmony. It's compassion. And compassion to me connotes an understanding that there is no separation between me and other. Okay? So I don't have to match harmonies because I have reached that place where the distinction between self and other is no more. And out of that place, there is an undifferentiated compassion that arises. It's like a knowing lovingness or whatever, because there is no me and them. When I get to that place, then I really don't have to worry about anything about me, because there's no me anymore. And in that place, there is no suffering. Now, we're not all going to achieve that, in the absolute, but we'll get moments of it, and we'll get little glimpses of it. And the more glimpses you can get, the less suffering you will experience.
So how do you communicate this to a potentially new client? They come in, they want to talk to you.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't do it overtly. All I can do is work on myself. So as long as I keep reminding myself that I am not better than or have more information than, or I mean, I have certain information and skills that I can offer, but as long as I keep reminding myself to be responsible, be accountable for my own projections, and stay in this place that kind of holds this person in a place where they can have their own realization, then we can get somewhere. I can point out things, and I can talk about things, and I can help remind them that there's another context in which to view their situation. But I can't make them go there. They have to have their own realization. And when they do, then we can elevate the conversation instead of let's go get those SOBs. We can elevate the conversation into something that's more productive and harmonious, if you will, for their life. And it may have nothing to do with the legal system. I mean, I've had people in my office, we talk about it and we go, gee, I just need to take care of myself. That's what this is about. That's what the message of this whole legal stuff is. And I don't want to go there. I'm going to take care of myself. Or, gosh, I see where they were coming from and I forgive them. Forgiveness is boom. There's no legal problem right there, right?
Yes, that was one of.
I'm not. Instead of I'll sue them, I forgive them, and then you're out of the legal system. You're out of suffering. You're in a different place, and you can move on with your life. I tell people all the time, as I say, look, one of the things that you have power over is how you think. You have power over how you view this situation. This other person who you think has caused you great harm, they're going about their daily lives. They're happy-go-lucky. They're down at the bar. They're having a good time. But you have these thoughts about how they mistreated you that you're walking around with every day, carrying these suitcases, and you're in the ditch. So what's happened? You've given that person power over how you feel in this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to continue to do that? If you do, I can show you the best way to do it. File a lawsuit. File a lawsuit, because you will then spin around and perpetuate this suffering yourself. You have total control over doing that. You can do it willingly. Sign here, and here we go. And you can give that person who's happy-go-lucky, they're out having a good lunch right now, total power over your life. Do you want to do that? And the way you do that is with your own mind. So if you get a grip on your own mind, guess what happens? They have no control over you anymore. That suffering's gone. And one easy way to do it, I forgive them. They were very bad, but I forgive them. I'm free now.
Yeah, forgiveness is the key. And
karma will take care of whatever that was. But now I'm freed up. I don't have to have these obsessive thoughts. I'm not in the ditch every day. I'm not suffering from PTSD anymore. And I can now move onward and upward. Did I lose some money? Maybe I did, but is it worth going? So I say all of that from a very expansive point of view. But there are some things that require forceful legal intervention and action. Childhood sexual abuse, harming another person, somebody out there actually intentionally creating suffering on the planet. Those types of things require you to stand up to prevent further suffering or future suffering of others. So,
but you stand with attachment.
But you stand up there and say, this is the role that has been assigned to me at this point. I'm not going to...
like Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita.
Right. I'm not going to become so attached and obsessed with this that I lose my health or my, sanity or whatever. Although I tell you, with the clergy abuse cases, I initially had difficulty handling the suffering that was coming. I just could not believe the degree of suffering, and I was having difficulty handling it. Of course, I went back into therapy for a few years to help me realize that I was becoming attached to their suffering and making it mine. And when I did that, I couldn't help them. So this thing of attachment and releasing attachment and yet remaining in responsible service is a very interesting balance.
Well, you went through what would be clinically equivalent to what they call complex PTSD, because you had multiple episodes coming at you.
Yeah,
and that's a difficult process.
It was very difficult. I think it was part of this, out of this came, that's another thing that out of this came the book, because the book was me grappling with my own process.
And ultimately, and I got to cut away for a few seconds, so I got a couple announcements, but ultimately, that was your path. That was the karma you came in here to meet, to get to that place, to write this book, to pass this information on. And you would not probably have written this book or be here talking about this book, obviously, if you hadn't had those experiences.
Well, and because of those experiences, it just came out. It kind of spewed it out. And there you have it.
Okay, we're going to come back. There's one last topic I wanted to talk about when we come back, is how to choose a lawyer. But before we do that, a couple announcements I got to make. First off, our good friends at Unity Santa Fe, which is 1212 Unity Way. That's the New Mexico 599 relief route. And their number is 989-4433. They have this coming Sunday, the 29th, a service at 10:30 a.m., workshops at 1:30 to 3:30 and 6 to 8 p.m., all around living beyond disease. These workshops are presented by Michelle Longo O'Donnell, who is founder of the first metabolic holistic clinic in the nation. Michelle has helped thousands with illnesses ranging from MS to cancer. Michelle is a minister and a registered nurse, and she explores the cause of physical suffering and how we can live free of disease. There is a suggested love offering, which I am not allowed to mention on the air. So that's Unity Santa Fe, Sunday the 29th. Call them for more information. That's 989-4433. Couple other quick announcements. Next week, Rabbi Schwab is going to be my guest. He's from Temple Beth Shalom, and we're going to talk about the 7 questions you get asked to get into heaven, or before you get to heaven. I forget the exact title of the book. Very interesting subject, very interesting question, so tune in next week. Personal note, I am both a minister and a licensed alcohol drug abuse counselor in the state of New Mexico. I do what I call spiritual counseling. I believe that without spirit we do not heal. I believe trying to heal using the same instrument that's creating the problems does not work. So I also work on a donation basis, so if you are interested, want to find out how to use spirit to help better your life, give me a call. My number's been flashing on the screen. My email has been flashing, and you will also get that at the end of the show. This is public access, and that means you, the public, are part of this whole process. So if there's anything that you'd like me to cover, any topic you'd like to hear discussed, or maybe you want to be part of a show, contact me. Be happy to talk with you. And also, I am looking for somebody who wants to do a show talking about Edgar Casey, who he was and what he taught. So if that's of interest to you, contact me and we can talk about doing a show. That's it for the announcements. You know, we were talking before, and even besides choosing a lawyer, you were talking about wanting to do some pro bono work, which is legal ease for free. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this has just come up recently, with all the suffering that's going on the planet and in our economy, and I just what we're going to start is, I'm not sure of the day, like the first Friday of every month. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to pick the day, but we're going to kind of clear the decks in the office, and myself and my associate are going to be available to give free legal advice, half an hour blocks, to anybody who has questions in certain areas of the law that I feel I have some competence in. And we're just going to make that available to the community, and we'll probably put an ad in the Reporter or in the Pasatiempo, basically listing the areas of law that we feel we can at least get people going in the right direction, because I know a lot of people have questions and they feel they can't afford to pay for answers, and it's just something that I really feel is important right now.
So they could start calling the number that's been flashing on the screen and like getting on the wait list, so to speak?
Sure, yeah, that's how we'll do it. We will put people on a list, schedule half an hour slots for a full day, and that's all we'll be doing, is seeing people in 30-minute intervals, and bring all of their paperwork or questions written out or whatever they want, and we'll do the best we can in 30 minutes. And if we can't, give them quick answers or get them in the right direction, we'll refer them to lawyers. I have a pretty good list of people that could help them, and so I really feel that's a good thing to do right now.
I think that's a great thing to do. So we got about 2 minutes to go. Besides being free, how do you choose a lawyer?
Just again, it's a feeling, and when you're hearing the truth, and when you're not, and so just stay in that feeling, intuitive place, the heart, if you will, and listen to friends, family. Referrals are good, but just kind of stay in touch with your own feelings, and if anything sounds off or not right, or not in tune with your own feelings, then remember that feeling, and just go with a lawyer who you feel good about. And it's a pretty simple process, but people
have to learn how to
do it for their own. So, the lawyer may have worked for your sister, but may not work for you, and that may be, you may walk into the lawyer's office and go, doesn't feel right. And so listen to that, but referrals from friends and family are really helpful to a point, but then you don't override yourself.
Exactly, because it may just be they got a good outcome, and they got dirty getting the outcome.
What's good for some people is not necessarily good for another. So
excellent. Well, I think we're almost out of time. You have a parting thought besides that last one?
Not really. I really enjoyed visiting with you. It was fun.
I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the work you're doing, Mert. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope you got something out of this. I maybe changed the perspective, that law and the heart is not contradictory. So until next week, you are divine. You are one with everything. Practice it, demonstrate it, and watch life change. So until next week, love and light, everybody. Blessings.
I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.